Hello and welcome to the first ever Tea Break Club podcast. Now, this is something that I've wanted to do for a really long time, and I've finally got around to doing it, and not for the reason that I first expected. At first, I wanted something to naturally replace the daily and weekly vlog that I used to do, and the podcast seemed like the natural way to do it. Now, this first episode that you're about to hear is probably going to be a little bit different to what the other episodes will be like, and you'll learn what the other episodes are like when they appear, when I release them. But this first episode has come from me basically giving up on editing a documentary. Normally, when I bring out an album or a single, I will create something to tell the story behind it. And in this case, I decided to go, overboard really. I've kind of really overdone it. And I watched the Olivia Rodrigo documentary on Disney Plus, and I thought, I could make a documentary like this about my album, Geoff, the self-titled album that I released a few months ago. I could break down the songs and say, this is how I wrote it, this is why I wrote it, and I could play a version of the songs, and it all sounded fantastic. And when it came down to actually doing it, I realised that that was not going to happen with one person filming it and one person editing it, particularly in my spare time. So I set out with the best intentions, and it hasn't quite come together in the way that I expected it to. But I did start by filming on a day earlier this year with my dad, and I invited my dad over to have a conversation with me on camera about the album. And I gave him a track list. I didn't play him any of the songs. And I just asked him to talk to me about the album and how I'd made it, why I'd made it, and why I'd chosen those songs for the album. And what you're about to hear is that conversation. I have tried over the last few months to edit this into a documentary, and it just hasn't come together how I expected. But these conversations, not only are they very special to me because it's my dad, but hopefully this gives you an idea as to why I made the self-titled album Geoff and the stories behind some of the songs. Some of the songs that I know you'll have maybe heard before, some of the ones that are new on this album. But hopefully this first episode, this flagship episode of the Tea Break Club podcast, gives you an insight into how I wrote this album and the stories behind it. So without further ado, I will let my dad and myself take over. Enjoy.
First question is, why make this album? Why have you made this album?
Isn't the first question, how are you?
Oh, is it?
How are you?
Oh, okay.
Good
First
morning,
question.
Dad.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm great, thank you. So what are we doing here today?
We're going to talk, aren't we? We're going to talk about some music.
Okay, we're going to talk about some music. That's great. Yeah. I mean, you've been writing music a long time. I know that.
You know
so
that,
I know. Yes, I've been. And one of the things that's amazing about your music, it's in my life. It's that moment. I know you're up there historically when you lived with us.
Yeah.
You were writing this music upstairs, and one of the things that was always brilliant and always an excitement. Although we heard little stabs of things, we never quite knew what was going to come out of that the alchemy that was happening upstairs. That
do you
was
feel the same thing about this then? Do you not
of course I do, because partly because I'm always excited about what I'm going to hear, and I'm always moved by your music because I think because of that connection, I know there's going to be something in it.
Yeah.
That's going to go, wow, that's great, and that visceral experience that Mum and I often will share. We'll just sit there, and I will be moved, as I am quite often moved to tears when I hear your stuff. So I'm really excited about knowing about this particular album. I mean, you've given me a listing of some of the album, some of the names of the songs, and I recognise one or two of them because historically they're kind of embedded in your history. So
Adam said that to me once. He said that I was very lucky that I was able to write songs because they were like points in my life, like photographs. He said most people have photo albums if they've got the kind of parents who take photos when you go on holiday or when you go to events. It's the kind of thing where at the time you're like, don't do that, please stop taking pictures of me. But like when you got something to look back on. Whereas actually there were quite a few songs on this little collection that are quite nostalgic. They do remind me of a particular period of my life.
Why are you making this album? Yeah, what I mean, I know when you made a song in 7 days, that I kind of know why you were doing that, but why are you making this album?
So the idea for this album started really in lockdown, and bizarrely I lost all of my inspiration. I think a lot of other musicians saw it as an opportunity to reflect and go in and do different things. Like, I was always really impressed that Taylor Swift brought out that album that I'm sure you know as well, Folklore, that was created during lockdown, because lockdown totally changed my priorities. It was about getting fit. It was about, I don't know, I guess survival instinct kind of kicked in, because it was just the four of us in that house. But I wasn't writing any music. The only song that I'd written during that time was Rework It Out. That was the only song that I wrote in 2020, apart from stuff that I'd started in 2019. And it took me a long time to pick up the pen and start doing it again. But what I was doing was a lot of playing. And I'm sure you remember there were little instances of me coming and playing with Lizzie. There was a point where we'd never ever done it before, and I came in with the acoustic guitar and we started playing, and I should have known better. And that was quite funny. And it was about that. It was about what can I do on my own. I was playing lots of things and putting them on social media and stuff like that. And I liked the rawness of it. A lot of my stuff, as you know, I love overtracking, I love layering stuff up. But even though I wasn't writing, I fell in love with the simplicity of making things real and going, okay, my voice doesn't sound that great on that, and okay, I might have hit a couple of bum notes there, but I'm making some music. So I thought, why don't I do that with a collection of my songs that I'm proudest of, if you like, and turn that into an album. So, like you say, there are quite a few songs on there you'll probably recognise, but it's taking it back to its core elements, taking it back to what is the most important thing, to the raw, honest aspect of the music, which, let's be honest, is missing from quite a bit of music right now. There isn't a huge amount of honesty in it, and I thought, well, okay, if I can put something out that feels honest to me, then that's a reflection of what I think music is about. That's why I make music anyway.
I mean, we were talking earlier about Peter Gabriel making So, and how that contrasts with what you seem to be doing here. He seemed to spend ages and ages and ages on like one song and almost like overproducing it. I know we ended up with a fantastic record, but why you mentioned stripping it back, and it's almost like the antithesis of that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's this idea of good enough is good enough. I think I've spent years and years trying to perfect things. And when I've put them out, they haven't felt any better than some of the stuff I was taking as long to film as it was to play, if that makes sense. So a lot of stuff that I was putting on social media, I was like, right, actually, well, I'm just as satisfied with that as I am with take Train of Thought on Song in 7 Days. There's orchestration, there's 2 acoustic guitar parts, there's a bass part, there's a guitar solo, there's like 4 distinct sections, lots of backing vocals. And I like that song, but I can't honestly say that I'm prouder of that than I am, say, a song like Alexa, which is me sat at a piano with a microphone, playing it from end to end. There is nothing else.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, this particular album is finished, but I'm already writing something else. I've already got 2 songs in the can, possibly 3 more songs, new ones, ready to go.
Yes.
It's just that they don't suit the aesthetic of this album. They don't work. They are something a bit different. So the creativity at the moment is probably, it's much better than it was in lockdown.
So, I mean, that's something that I'm aware of as well. You've got this body of work that's not just songs, you've got musicals and all sorts of things that you've got. And it'll be fascinating as we go through. I mean, you've picked 8 songs?
Yeah, I think that's right.
You've picked 8 songs. I'd be curious as we go through why you've picked these. And in a way, I just want to really nail this one. why now for this album? Why are you doing it now? I think in a way you've skirted around that by saying, well, this is the time just to we'll come out of lockdown. But why now? Why now? For this album?
Because we've come out of lockdown, like you say. Because I have more stuff that I want to do as well, and this album feels like a crucial step to me. But also because I want to put something truthful out. I want to be honest with the music, and is that something that happens every day in the music industry at the moment? Probably not.
An old favourite of mine, because it's one of your early songs. I mean, it's unpredictable. So about that particular song, because that's even had radio airplay, hasn't it, as well?
Yeah.
So let's go back, because I know a little bit about. But why did you write that? Why did you write Unpredictable?
So Unpredictable, Unbelievable in its full name, which we shortened to Unpredictable, we made it into the Usual Ones version of it, was a song that was written as a B-side. And I always find this so funny, because at the time, as a band, I can't remember what we were called at that point, because we were called about 19 different things. We were either called Sound of Silence, we were either called Local Heroes. I think it might have been Local Heroes era. We were about 15, I think. And we were just getting to the point where we were trying to get the covers out of our set as a band. And we were just trying to write originals to fill those gaps. And my perception at the time with Unpredictable, Unbelievable was that we just needed another song to fill the set. That we got these singles, songs like Think About It and Tell Me It's Not True and all that kind of stuff. No, Tell Me That It's True, that's what it was called. Not the song from Blood Brothers. I didn't write that. And there was this perception that we needed to fill the time. And you probably, I don't know if you do remember the date, but I can remember the date it was written. I know that it was written probably in 2007, and we went to Scarborough with Jack and Jonna, and we just dug a massive hole on the beach, and then came back, and we'd got a rehearsal the next day, and I'd got that EMAC at the time, remember the white EMACs, with GarageBand on it, and I remember playing in these chords, and I remember playing in like a sort of, played in that. Like that, and I just sort of, I'd layered that up, and then I put the like that, because I was obsessed with octave shapes at the time because of My Chemical Romance, and it was the perfect easy lead guitar part. Played it to Jack, was like, yeah, great, and it's really interesting because when I played it to the rest of the band, when you go in with that mentality of going, this is just something to fill the space, this is just something to fill a gap, everyone goes, okay, and that's, they treat it as such. And I remember the bass lines that were written on it by Jonna were really, really interesting. And Joe had this great drum part for it where he was kind of going kind of on top of it in its full band version. And when we started to play it for people reacted to it in a really positive way. And we were a bit like, why? This is just the B-side, right?
One of the things I'm excited about is how this new version sounds similar and how it would sound different to and that, I suppose, the question, in what ways do you think this will be different this time before we've heard it, or should we just wait and hear?
Well, I think the easiest way to answer that is that you will know that until, I know we haven't all met up in a long time, but whenever we've been to Jack's house, there's always been a point where 2 acoustic guitars have come out. And even though it's probably the only thing that Jack and I play together on the guitar anymore, and we always play it with 2 acoustic guitars. And that's the version that's kind of survived. Because I can hear Uncle Mike saying, I love this song, I play Unpredictable, Unbelievable. It's just that, and that's the version that survived. So the version on this is as if me and Jack are playing it on two
Oh,
acoustic
fantastic!
guitars.
I'm really excited about that. And is that why you've picked it? Or?
Yeah, and also because I do have a tremendous amount of affection for this song. It reminds me of several different times. It reminds me of 2007 and being in that band and all the fun that we had. It reminds me of revisiting it. But it's one of those songs that people say to me, I still love that song. And it needed to be on this record. So, Sunflower is the first song that I have written in this house. So, I kind of started it as a chorus, and Sunflower is an exercise in trying to write something simple that still makes sense and still has some meaning to it, if that makes sense. I have recently become obsessed with this idea that Paul McCartney talks about, in that when they were travelling around, the Beatles would have to write something that they'd be able to remember the next day. Because they could write the words down, but they didn't have a tape machine with them, or my iPhone notes, because this song was ultimately born out of my iPhone notes. But Paul said that it was like the best and the worst thing to happen to the music industry, because he said, I've got thousands of ideas in my iPhone, but it isn't conducive to finishing things. So with Sunflower, what I've tried to do is write a simple song, but not simple enough for me to remember the next day. So when I wrote this, I was coming back and I was playing it every single day, seeing if I could remember all the elements of it. But there's something that Jimmy Webb says about songwriting, which is that songs should be like Swiss watches, in the sense that we take them for granted in being simple in their function, but if you pay closer attention, there is exquisite detail. It's important, that exquisite detail. There's something there for the discerning listener. And I think Sunflower is like that. I think the lyrics are sentimental. I think it's a nice song, but ultimately it's meant to be just nice and take you somewhere else, I guess.
I'm curious because, as you know, I'm interested in how the mind works and things like that. So how have you written it so that you remember it? And are you talking about the music or the lyrics? How you...
Both actually. I think what I did with it, let's see if I can get the key right on this. Is I had the melody. So the first thing I did was I got the words in the verses came second. So I had this kind of da 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 right, so I had that going round, okay, until I could remember it. And then the beauty of that is the lyrics come to you while you're driving in the car, and the spaces fill themselves out, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, because I'm thinking that you're actually growing sunflowers, aren't you? You've never been interested.
Alexa, stop. Sorry, say that again.
Never been interested in gardening at all, and now you're actually growing the things out here.
Yeah.
And they're coming on nicely, I must admit. And you did, I think the first year we were here, you had some, didn't you? The first summer you had some, so must have been inspirational.
No, I didn't have them here. I've never had any sunflowers there before.
All right, okay.
These are the first.
These are the first ones, okay. And you obviously picked this one for the natural reason that it's the first one you've written.
Yeah.
So, again, I've not heard. Those are the first notes, chords I've heard of this song. I'm really looking forward to that one as well.
ring a bell?
It isn't ringing a bell.
Okay, interesting. So it's the opening track on Taking My Time.
Okay.
And it's all written around one line. That is how I wrote the song originally. And the line was, I always knew I could get to you, I just kept it as an ace to play.
Yes, I remember it. Again, yes.
Right? And that's all I had.
Yes.
That chorus, if you like, was all I had for that.
Yes.
The rest of it is based around that.
I suppose that ties back into this idea of these, sometimes the chord, I'm hearing the chord, and then I don't hear the melody until you sing, and that's always a mystery to me, because how you get that melody from those chords, where does that come from?
So the beautiful thing about using two chords all the way through October 9/15, it's basically just A and F sharp minor, right? In as many different ways. So the intro is that. But the verse, right?
Yes.
And the rest of it came from writing the lyrics before. So it's the other way around. So I had a couple of lines that I really wanted to write. And it's quite an all over the place song, this. I wrote it when we were in Moratika. So I actually didn't have the guitar with me. I just had the idea of these chords going round. So
Moratika is
Corfu. When we were in Corfu, yeah, absolutely. The place we went to together most recently. And I was sat by the pool with a notepad, and I just had a few lines going round. One of the lines was, your cigarette smoke in the morning sun, I never see you get things done. I had that line, and I knew it was gonna kind of form the basis of certain things. And the way the syllables fall in that line. And I had an extra line on that with, I think the line was, I just see the promises that you break. And the weird thing about this song is that it isn't about anyone or anything in particular, but when I look back on it to put it onto this, I realise that the person that I've written this about isn't a very nice person. You know, it's one of those strange things where I was writing lines. There's one or two. There's that one about never getting things done. There's also driving without your headlights on when you should. It's not a good thing to do. But all these lines just came because they kind of felt right in places. I was painting the picture of a scene of something, but it's not about anyone. And I really hope it's not about anyone, because it's not nice.
Why October 19th? What's the
October 9/15 is one of these things that it just fitted into the lyric scheme.
I see.
It wasn't written in October. It's got nothing to do with 9/15. 9/15 is October in the phonetic alphabet?
It might be actually. Is it?
So it could be 0915. It could be a flight number. It could be a time. It could be 9 isn't even 9 is September in it. So it doesn't work, does it? It doesn't make any sense.
But it kind of ties in a little bit. One of the interesting points that you made there, when we were in Corfu on that holiday, you were in a relaxed state, I think, but you didn't have, there was no guitar, no piano there. No. And so the inspiration, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Can you be creative when you put yourself under pressure? Clearly you can. You've done that. When you put under, can I write a song in, and you can do that. But sometimes these things are actually coming to you out of the blue, literally, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So, and this has made it onto the album because?
Because, again, it was one of these songs that felt like it could be performed in that way. It could be stripped back to you know, straight, nice acoustic guitar chords. Everywhere has been one of those songs that has evolved so many times. I remember playing it with the usual ones, and we're playing it with Sam, and we went to do a version of it, and because Sam and I have known each other for as long as this song has existed, he jokingly said to me, which version of it are we doing today? Because I've written so many different versions of this song. And the one that I settled on was the one that I wrote in 2017 for the usual ones. I was told in my first year of uni that my lyric writing was not very good. And it took me 4 years, or rather it took my ego 4 years to acknowledge that that was true. They said that my music was good, but they said that the lyrics were really, really lacking. And I didn't really know what that meant, so I just carried on writing and carried on doing the same thing as I always did. And it came to a point where maybe 2014, 2015, when I left university, that I thought, maybe there's some truth in this. I was surrounded by a lot of great writers, people like Carl Benison, and he's just such a fantastic lyric writer and music writer. And I knew that I could write great lyrics too. I knew I could get to that point with my writing, and I was inspired by people like him to kind of get to that level. So I got in touch with the lecturer who had said to me that my lyrics weren't that great. Because
Really?
Because he was one of my favourite lecturers. And I said to him, this is something that you said, what should I do? What should I read?
So you'd just been, in the early days, you'd been criticised, but nobody giving you any specifics. This is what could be better about.
Yeah.
You just told them, not your music's good, but your lyrics aren't very good.
Lyrics aren't very good.
That's not particularly good feedback. But I admire you for going back and...
Yeah, and I knew there was something that could be done, and I was recommended a book. I was recommended Jimmy Webb's book on songwriting. And that is the book that totally changed my songwriting life. And I read it from cover to cover again and again and again. And it made me totally rediscover the way that I was writing lyrics. Little journeys within that. And the first song that I wrote with that new skill set, if you like, was You'll Love This Christmas. And I took the lyrics that I'd written for a Christmas song, a terrible Christmas song that I'd written the year before, called Norwegian Fir Tree, it was called. It was absolutely terrible. But we thought it was really funny at the time, and it wasn't at all. The music was all right, and it was quite jazzy, and I took it and I rewrote it, and obviously Max and Dan performed it, and I was really proud of that. So I thought, okay, if I can take that song and do it, let's take Everywhere. This song that had started its life as a demo, the old versions of Everywhere, again, like Unpredictable, are online. You can find them, they are out there. Totally different lyrics, totally different styles. Some of them are more like The Darkness for some reason. So I took that version, I took that original version, and I thought I'll rewrite it and I'll use this new system, this new emphasis on lyrics to change things. Rewrote the melody again, and the resulting version was born.
So can you allude to one or two key things that Webb would recommend you do when you write the lyrics?
Absolutely. Perfect example is that with Everywhere, I had to write a melody first. And the reason I had to write a melody first is because in the original versions of it, it was very, very wordy. And having a melody first allows you to stick to the same amount of syllables in each verse.
Right.
So I had that.
So it imposes a discipline on...
Yeah, exactly. So I had that kind of... Alright, and that is the same in all the other verses. I have to fill the same space. Same with etc. All that is the same. Chorus wise, another big thing that he was keen on getting writers to do is rhyme, and the really good rhyming dictionary. Rhyme is a shelter for mediocrity, because the Percy Shelley quote that's in the book. It says that is going to get you through a lot of situations, and it has saved me multiple times. Yeah, it has saved me multiple times, that for sure.
The two parts of this song which I think interest. I don't know if this taps into the Jimmy Webb mentality. And when I hear you playing this, I'm with my map and knowing you, I'm thinking, this song is about and a very specific person. But then I find myself listening to the song in my car, and the time that it was coming out, you talked about it. The everywhere I go, I see your face. It becomes a very personal thing to me, just related to grandma. I can see that, but I suppose one of the things about Jimmy, well, I don't know, is it some of the best songs are songs where you can't quite pin them down. They actually could apply to anybody at any time. They've got different meanings. Is that one of the?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
messages?
I think there's got to be there's got to be a connection with this in a way that you can feel all the best songs are about you anyway. I think there are songs fall into two categories like that, don't they? So like She's Always a Woman isn't vague. It's quite obviously about one person. It's, I don't know who that's about, and again, that's one of those songs, isn't it, where you think, well, it's not
Billy Joel's song.
Yeah, it's not a particularly nice person he's writing about, is it? But She's Always a Woman is definitely about one person. It couldn't be about anyone. And there are other songs that do kind of fit that criteria. I'm doing that classic thing where I can't think of any songs that do fit that criteria, where you think, yeah, that could be about me. I'd feel a deep connection to that. I think maybe the second verse of American Pie is quite a, did you write the book of love, and do you have faith in God above? That one. But what's the most important part? And I know that you're in love with him, 'cause I saw you dancing in the gym. You both kicked off your shoe. Now I dig those rhythm blues. I mean, that we've all felt that. That's great,
Yes.
And that's
when you're seeing
and
somebody.
you could go, Don McLean, who's that about?
Yeah.
No one's interested.
Yeah. That's an example of show, don't tell, isn't it? You can tell from that longing, looking at the gym. But there's a fantastic line in Everywhere, and I think it's one of your best lyrics. You know which one I mean?
Used to kiss me while you wait for the lights.
Yes, and why is it? Because that's universal as well. It's like again, that's a show, don't tell. Because if you're sitting with somebody you think the world of, and there's the moment you've got to grab their hand or kiss them, or she was doing this to you. That's a fantastic lyric.
Yeah, and I think the thing that makes it sadder, that always made it sadder to me, was it's used to, isn't it? It's not.
Yes.
It's not.
Yeah,
and so
what you can picture now is being reminded that when you pull up to some traffic light and you just stop and you pause.
Yeah.
And you can look at that empty seat and just imagining that longing, it is about, I saw you dancing in the gym, and wow, yes.
On Paper was the second song that I wrote for A Song in 7 Days. And it is still a song that I'm immensely proud of years later. It may be the best song I've ever written. It may be. The first song was New Year Still Me, and that was a bit of overtracking and stuff like that. But the second song was really me just kind of going out on a limb and doing something that I really just wanted to do. I wanted to make an 80s style love song. And on paper it is that, you know. It is built in that same way. I got all that old gear out, like the Yamaha DX7 and stuff like that, and built the sounds from it. And I wrote it to be released on Valentine's Day. So I started it early enough. I think I finished New Year Still Me. It took me, 7 days, because they all did, apart from 1 or 2. And I finished that late January. Started it early February, knowing that I wanted to get it finished and get it out for the 14th, because it's a love song, right? But there's something about it that just worked to me. And yeah, it's one of those songs that kind of speaks for itself in many ways, but I don't know, I'm just really proud of it.
Is it about that mismatch between who you think is going to be suitable because we've all had those sort of relationships where you think on paper this person should be all right for me, but in reality there's a mismatch, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. And it was obviously about using dating apps, which I was using at the time.
Well, that's it, the modern
romance
of that.
There's a great book by Aziz Ansari called Modern Romance. They wrote it with a sociologist, and I read that, and it was very much sort of based on that vein, and how love and romance has changed over the years. And it's a really interesting book, actually. But it's basically just about how not only that we're talking about there, but also about how there's so much expectation on people now to do things a certain way and to meet certain criteria, and how people can let us down in an instant by having a particular view, and how perfectionist we are about it. Whereas in like the 50s, the book basically alludes to the fact that both families would check the other person was not a murderer and you were good to go, basically. And that love would grow over a number of years. And that platonic love would start and you go, okay, I can tolerate this person. But the romantic love would come in time. Whereas my generation expects love to fall. I think, to be honest, it just comes down to the same thing, that the end of Annie Hall. The man takes his brother to the doctors and says, "Doctor, he thinks he's a chicken. My brother thinks he's a chicken. I'm really worried about him." And he says, "Well, why don't you bring him in?" And he says, "Oh, well, I really need the eggs." And that's, and he says, that's how I feel about romance and modern love, that it's crazy and it's irrational, but we all do it because we need the eggs.
Yes.
And I think it doesn't matter whether it's the 50s style romance stuff or the modern day perfectionist romance. It all comes down to that same crazy, irrational stuff. And I guess that's really what the song's about. The first part of it came from that. But after that, the chorus came, the... And there's something about F major, isn't there? I really like F major as a key. It makes me think of Romeo and Juliet's in F major. Thunder Road is in F major. Etc. Also, Barbara O'Reilly by The Who.
What's interesting though is when you play the chords on the guitar, I couldn't necessarily hear where the melody was coming. I can hear the on paper melody come on. Can you explain that to me musically or not? Is that
piano's like a big orchestra, isn't it? It's like you've got 88 keys on there. You can express it in a totally different way. In many ways, it's constricting like that because you kind of feel like everything has to make sense under your fingers. Whereas guitar, you can think, oh, I could take that with me anywhere and I can make it work and I can hum the tune. But songs I write on here end up being very different. I don't think there's any guitar apart from maybe one rhythm bit in the middle 8 of the original version of On Paper. In this version that I've made for this, it is just me and the piano. And it's kind of proof that it works with that. There's maybe one very simple piano part in the original, but there isn't actually. It's a lot of synth, isn't it? And keyboards and stuff like that. And it's actually pretty much driven along by the same harmony all the way through, if you like, but it's driven by the arrangement of it. Whereas it was really interesting in this version of it to take it back to its the key parts in it, which effectively are the piano chords.
And other than it being one of your favourite songs, any other reasons why you picked it this time?
I think people talk about unpredictable and believable, but people talk about this more.
Yes.
I remember when I put this out and there were comments on it from people who hadn't spoken to me in a long time saying, Geoff, this is really great. And I'm thinking, wow, is it? I thought I've written something that's maybe a little bit out of my time. It's got the kind of like no jacket required kind of feel to it. And you know what people like about Phil, don't you? You know, there is this kind of like, oh, let's leave the 80s where they were kind of thing. And I was like, no, let's get the synthesizer out and do something like that. And you know I love that music. And I just did something I wanted to do, and I brought it out on Valentine's Day. And I'd argue that if you like Valentine's Day, you're probably busy. And people loved it. So here it is again.
This is a new one, which is called I'll Be There.
Yeah. So I finished this song maybe in 2017. I felt maybe 2018. I finished this a long time ago, and I've kept this under lock and key for a very, very long time.
Wow.
Because I've always felt that it could be one of the best songs I've ever written.
Right.
But I was just waiting for the right time. And there are so many instances in my writing, say for example where when I released On Paper, the reception with it being Valentine's Day and stuff like that, it fell and everything was right. It fell at the right time. Then I released You've Got This in June and nobody cared. And I was really proud of that song. And regardless of what people will say, and you can say, oh, it's just all about the writing, it's all about the creativity. But if the reception isn't there, it can be really devastating. Whereas I've now kind of got to the point where this song's kind of cooled off a bit. I've let it sit there for a few years and I'm still really pleased with it. And now is the right time to release it.
I'm interested in that, you know, when you talk about the reception, one of the things that seems to be built into actors, when I've heard actors speak, when they go into audition, something that seems to be built into their training is a rejection. They build rejection into what they do. So an actor will go into an audition, even with many parts under the belt, and give it the best shot, but walk away and never know whether they've got the part or not. And I think I imagine there are parallels with writing songs, because you can do what you think you might, the equivalent of a fantastic audition. You go and do an audition and you never hear back.
Yeah.
And how have you managed to train yourself to think that I know this is a good song because it meets my standards, or do you still wait for response from other people?
I've played this for 2 people, this song, so far, as we're sat here. And there's something about this song and the way that the story goes in it that kind of makes people go, ooh, okay. And when you hear it, you'll understand what I mean. But I think there comes a little bit of litmus test in there, doesn't there? Kind of like, well, let's see what these people think. And you go, right, okay. But it's not just about meeting my standards, it's about the fact that this still now gets me emotionally. Creating this story and these lyrics. When I play it back, I go, oh, okay, yeah. I've tapped into something that I love. I've tapped into songs that I want to hear. I think of that Peter Gabriel song, Father's Son. What an unbelievable bit of writing that is, because that will just, it's like, it'll get you, won't it? There's just something about that song that's it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think this gets me in the same way, and I think, right, well, if that gets me, I'm quite an emotional soul, so maybe it'll get everyone else too. The first thing that came after knowing what the premise was going to be about, because the premise, I was inspired by a song by Jimmy Webb, which is called The Worst That Could Happen, which is a song about a wedding, and this is a song about a wedding too, and it's quite. Worst that could happen is basically just, how does it go? And it's like, baby, if I feel like you more than me,
I like that. I can feel that.
It's a great song. And I thought, right, I want to write something like that. The first thing that came to me was this. Right? And that was kind of that's the verse melody. That was the thing and I thought, right, okay, now I've got that, I can write stuff around it. The chorus itself is really interesting when we're talking about Paul Simon, is taken from the Brahms Haydn Variations, one of my favourite pieces of classical music, which is right, okay? It's the St Anthony Chorale, and we did it in analysis in third year. But the chorus of this song goes. Right, so it's kind of the same harmony, it's even the same key. But
it's almost like a hymn.
Yeah.
That part of it, and I kind of think,
Yeah.
well, you were saying wedding earlier, and you kind of
It
think,
ties together quite nicely, yeah.
I'm going to be a little bit cagey about how I actually ask this, because these days I'm just surrounded by these particular devices. You've got one here, so I don't know if it'll respond. So I think you've been very brave to call the song Alexa.
And there you go, that is proof it's doing it. It's doing it right.
There's a response, but I'm not saying, right.
I'll tell you fact, for the sake of... No, it's really interesting this, because when I was writing it, when I was singing it, you do actually have to... It will even detect you when it's singing. I'm going to turn it up. But it does happen. It's not just you, trust me. There we go. It won't pick you up now. But, well, maybe the one upstairs.
So when you write a song like that, it would partly... the use of that triggering word, the use of Alexa...
And it went
to make it happen.
Yeah, and you're right, and that is what it was. I think when I first started getting these devices, I started asking questions like, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? What's that? And the verses in Alexa are asking impossible questions of these personal assistants that we've now got in our home. And yeah, that is the crux of where the idea for it came.
Do you think that's inevitable? Do you think that as these devices learn more and more about us, and as the artificial intelligence gets better, ultimately they might even be able to give even though you might think you're asking an impossible question, you think it'll get to know us personally and be able to give an informed answer?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. That's a good question. I kind of hope not. I think technology is great to replace a lot of things, but I don't think it can ever replace the emotional side of things, because the questions you'd have like that, it's some of the questions that are asked in the lyrics of Alexa. If you were to ask, Alexa those questions, it would have to know a lot of information about the other people as well, and that strikes me as being quite illegal, doesn't it? Yeah. These are age-old questions that you're asking it, and it doesn't matter whether we're asking Alexa or we're asking the Microsoft Encarta CD encyclopedia, or whether we're flicking through a book, we're always looking for answers to these questions. And this is the way that we ask questions now, and I'm sure something else will come along, but these are the questions that we ask about romance and love and relationships. And it resonated with me because I thought, isn't it quite funny that you could actually, what would she say if you answer these questions? And someone did actually comment saying, oh, it would be really good if you did a responses type thing to this. But the thing about it is, it doesn't matter how clever these devices get, they'll never know the answers to these things. Right. And I think I actually have the or Alexa, can you tell me the meaning of true love? I just can't seem to find it anyway. I have that. And then I think the just came from just kind of playing with the second half of it. But it is a verse format song. I knew I wanted that. I knew I wanted to have an old time feel. I wanted it to be anachronistic. That kind of, we're talking about something modern, like that, like La La Land. Can't play it, but someone to watch over me, because that is embarrassing that I can't play that. But there's something about that song, isn't there? Because it is literally the same thing, same verse, short verse, and then you've got something that breaks it up. He may not be the man some girls think of as handsome, but to my heart he carries the key. That bit is the middle bit of Alexa as well, just something to break it up, and then it comes back to that one. You tell him please to put on some speed. Beautiful bit of writing that, and it's an older thing, isn't it? We love don't bore us, take us to the chorus, don't we, in modern pop music? Whereas I want to do something that was a bit older feeling, but the hook is the first line. It's the questions, because it's a song about Alexa. But that is that. Can you tell me the meaning of true love? The reason why this is on there is because in many ways this song, which I started in 2019 and finished in 2020. I released this on Valentine's Day of 2020, actually. So this is like pretty much the end of my output before now. It was the start of this thinking of, it's just me and a piano. Can I make this work in its simplest form? This is the genesis, if you like, of this record. It's the flagship song, and going, oh, okay. And actually this version on it is different to the version that I originally played. Not in that it's had any changes. Oh, it has had a change. This is one of the lyrics that I've changed. I changed, Alexa, can you tell her there hasn't been a day where thoughts of her have rarely slipped my mind, because I thought it was a bit clunky. I changed the word rarely to ever, because it makes sense. Where thoughts of her have ever slipped my mind. Makes more sense, right? Same amount of syllables, rarely, ever. But thoughts of her have rarely slipped my mind is kind of like, it's actually a bit of a like, oh, we've come all this way and they rarely, okay? Whereas ever is pretty definite.
Solid, yeah.
Yeah, and that is one of the lyrics that I've changed. But other than that, it's pretty much, it's a different version, but it's the same way. It's me and a piano. I think there's a bit of bass on it as well, just to kind of make some of the things a bit more solid in those middle sections, stuff like that, just to make it slightly different to the original. These Streets was written about Edinburgh, and it was specifically written with this premise that places are about people, and that if you go to somewhere that previously was filled with people that you love and there isn't anyone there, it's not the same. And it's had some interesting readings over the years, this song. And when I first released it, in a way, the comment section of this song became a what's the right word? Like an obituary section of a newspaper. People were writing, I heard this and I thought of this person. Total strangers, just
really,
just filling it with things like that and missing this person. And I didn't write it from a grief perspective. I wrote it from this idea that I was in Edinburgh, and I obviously did a whole vlog episode on this. I wrote it, and it was quite difficult to be there and just be visiting and not be with the same people I was, and thinking, oh, you know what, yeah, we can go and have a milkshake in this place, we can go and sit in this bar. That's where the line, this glass of 16 year told me that I'd find you here, but you know where to be found. I was stood in a queue with Will waiting for a show, and we'd just been for a drink in the Almanac. We'd just been for a whiskey. And we were kind of like, this is great and this is really tasty whiskey, but it's just the two of us, and we were with other people before, and it hasn't got the same energy. And I just remember walking around, but also there's also an element of it, it's like this is a sister song to this city on Here of All Places. And that kind of alludes to the same thing, but that was specifically written about the Fringe Festival and the few days that me, Sam and Will were stuck in Edinburgh waiting to get a lift back, and they were kind of dismantling the festival, and it was like having your soul ripped out of you because Edinburgh's a beautiful city, but it was all these things that we were used to, all the places we were sitting and having drinks and having a laugh, and they were kind of taking it away, and it was very odd, and people who we were with were being taken away, if you like. That sounds very dramatic, but they were like being, people were going home, and it was just left the three of us, and we were like, oh wow, this really does feel different to a week ago. And this song is about that, and about being in one of those places again and revisiting it. And
it's quite interesting because there's that universality of what you're saying, where people, I think, will connect with going, yeah, this feels different because certain people aren't there anymore. But I'm just in mind of something that happened just over a week ago when you went back to Oxford.
Yeah.
And we were sitting in that pub.
Yeah.
And you were thinking, this place is different. I'm just expecting Sam to come round the corner because this is where I would have sat and had a pint.
Yeah.
And you find out
that he's actually there
100 yards away,
Yeah, I mean, that was a bizarre coincidence, wasn't it?
But again, it brings back this idea that I suppose that although those people aren't there, they never kind of leave us, do they? They're there. And I can imagine that why people would, not that you were treating it as an obituary, but more of a sense of, I was there with quite a lot of people at that time, and that time has gone. And Edinburgh might be during the Fringe, it might be as full as it ever was. But those people that were there, and that combination of people, will be never there again. And it makes us all feel sentimental, can't it?
Oh, absolutely it does. And I think that's the sentimentality of that song is written into the music, isn't it? There's that kind of the thing that that pedal, that's where it all is. And then because it's actually there all the way. And then it jumps up. Magic of the tonic pedal there. It's just something about that kind of pulls it into this emotional space. This feels like it puts more emphasis on the lyrics, on telling that story. And whereas on paper is quite similar as well, in terms of its full arrangement without the words on, there are those kind of emotional undercurrents there. And this does it has a different emotional undercurrent because it's about the story. It puts the emphasis back on the lyrics rather than the production, which I think really is what all of this is about. It's about, if you take away everything else, what are you left with? And this I think is what you're left with.
Like distilling it down.
Yeah.
Right. You talked earlier about you're already onto new things. What's coming next?
I'm going to do something quite different, but I will carry with me my mentality of this.
Right.
This kind of raw, stripped back stuff. There might be a fuller band involved. There might be more electric guitar involved, but there will be this sense of not being as much of a perfectionist and just going, what can we take this down to? If it's going to be a full band song, what's the bare minimum we can have in here to make it work? Can it be performed live? Can we make it resonate with people? Can I make it resonate with myself, most importantly? Because I write the songs for myself first and foremost. I write songs that I love. I write the kind of things that I would listen to.
Yeah.
That's really what it's always been about for me.
Yes.
And I think I look at those 4 albums that are behind you. I've got Here of All Places, Revolver, Welcome into State Managers, and Hamilton. And I think those 4 albums are important to me for 4 reasons. Here of All Places, work with your friends. Revolver, always be on the cusp of something great, because that's what Revolver is. Revolver is them saying, here we go, here's our statement of intent, this is where we're going. Welcome into State Managers is an album that could have easily been 13, 14 singles. There's no weak link on that album. And Hamilton is make sure that someone tells your story. If you don't tell your story, nobody will. And that's what it reminds me. And I think of all of these songs that I've written, and I think about how my friends have been involved, how some of them are statements of intention, and how these are my best songs, I think. But also how I'm telling different people's stories. And those are things that I will take into my work going forward, regardless of what genre I work in.
Fantastic. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dad. It's been great to talk to you. I think that someone who understands where I've come from, but also...
The bit that I'm always keen on is that you continue to do this, because I think you're really, really good at it. And I'm you mentioned Hamilton, because I'm a lover of musicals, and the thought of seeing another musical, whether that be one of the plays with music that you've done, or whether it's the whole enchilada. I mean, whatever you do, that would be. I'm looking forward to those as well if they come. Yeah,
I think, but don't forget that all these little songs that I write are little stories in themselves.
Yes, they are.
I always come back to that though. I always come back to musicals. I always come back to telling stories through music. And people have said that my songs have a story-like quality to them. But you've got to do something with it. Haven't you? You've got to tell a story with a song or make a point with it. Those are those are the two main things to me.
And when people are reaching out to you about these songs, I mean, you talked about some songs where the response has been surprising to you. How do people actually get in touch with you and tell you about them?
Well, the thing is, that's what the Tea Break Club is for, isn't it? That's really my closer community around my music that I'm trying to build. And that is really what it's about, having these discussions. And people who've watched this have got to see this and got to see it because they're members of the Tea Break Club. They've got that interest in how these things are made, but also knowing that they can shape the way that this music's made.
That's what I was wondering. Can they influence what? Of
course they can, and everybody influences. These things don't happen without the Tea Break Club. They don't happen without the community around the music. Without the community, the music doesn't exist, does it?
Can you give an example of where somebody's actually influenced you then?
Yeah, absolutely. There are far too many instances to mention individual people, but I think the way that people have said, have you thought about writing a song like this? Or, I like the way that you've done that. Why don't you take that and make it more stripped down? And it comes from these musical family conversations. And there are so many people within that sphere who really incredibly support the stuff that I do. And I take that and I use it, and it fuels me and it makes me want to make more stuff. And that's really what it's about. It's about the longevity, how long I can stay in this game,
Yes, what is it? As Simon Sinek would say, it's about
it's an infinite game.
Infinite game.
You've got to stay in it, and that's it.
Great stuff.
But no, thank you for talking to me. I really appreciate it. I think
you're welcome. I've really enjoyed that myself. Thank you.
Good. Well, shall we have a veggie sausage sandwich then?
Ooh, like a hot dog.
Yeah, like a hot dog. Yeah, there we go. I know.
Now you're talking.
There you go. Speaking your language. All right.
So there you go. That is the conversation in its entirety. I really hope you've enjoyed that, and I really hope you've enjoyed this flagship podcast. I can't think of any other way to say that other than flagship. It's something that people used to say about big shops, isn't it? Like Woolworths, the flagship Woolworths. Anyway, yes. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening, and look out for episode 2. I will see you on our next tea break.